The first rule of Outpost Kestrel 9 was simple enough to fit on a single laminated card, bolted beside every airlock. Asterisk. Do not make eye contact with a Vael broodmother. Not because it was rude, not because it would offend them, because, as far as anyone knew, it would get you killed. I'd been on the station for 3 weeks. When Sergeant Okoye pressed that card into my hand, on my first day of perimeter duty, tapping the words with a calloused finger like he was driving a nail into my skull. You'll want to remember that, he said. Better than remembering your own name. I was 26 years old, 6 months out of the Colonial Exploration Corps Academy, and I had never seen a Vael in my life, except in grainy surveillance footage. The recordings didn't do them justice. Nothing could have prepared me for the reality of 9 feet of segmented chitin, the color of oil slicks, 4 arms ending in manipulator claws, so precise they could thread a needle, and a head that was almost human in its proportions, except for the eyes. 6 of them, arranged in a ring around a crown of bone ridges, each one glowing faintly amber like a bed of dying coals. My name is Dane Osei, and I was a xenolinguistic specialist, assigned to First Contact Auxiliary Team 7, stationed on the edge of a system we designated Threshold, orbiting a gas giant, the local, if you could call an entire hive mind species locals, referred to in a language of pheromone bursts and subsonic hums, that our translation arrays rendered, roughly, as the nest that watches. The Vael had been there long before we arrived, ancient, insectoid, and utterly alien in their social structure. A hive built around a single reproductive and cognitive center, the broodmother, who was less an individual than a living nucleus, around which thousands of drones orbited in perfect, silent obedience. Every human who had ever locked eyes with a broodmother had died within 72 hours. That was the official record. 5 confirmed cases across 2 different expeditions, going back 9 years. No survivors, no exceptions, no explanation. The working theory among our exobiologists was some kind of neurological parasite transmitted through direct optical contact. A kill switch evolved to protect the hive's most vital member from anything that got too close, too curious, too bold. So we didn't look. We kept our eyes on the ground, on our boots, on the horizon, anywhere but the 6 molten eyes of the creature who ruled that world. We traded with the drones through translation drones and gesture array. We mapped their tunnel. We cataloged their biology from a respectful, blinkered distance. And we survived. That was the arrangement. That was supposed to be the arrangement. Until the day the broodmother came to me. It happened during a routine soil sampling expedition, 11 kilometers from the outpost, in a valley of black glass, formed by some ancient volcanic event, where thin veins of blue lichen grew in spiral patterns nobody could yet explain. I was with 2 others, Priya Anand, our expedition's geologist, and a translation drone we'd nicknamed Whistler, for the way its vocalized, clicked and hissed when it worked. We heard the hive before we saw it. A low vibration through the ground, a chorus of clicks that built into something almost like a heartbeat. Drones emerged from fissures in the glass-black rock, dozens of forming a loose perimeter around us. Not aggressive, just present, the way a tide comes in without any particular malice. Then the ground itself seemed to shift, and she came through. I knew, immediately, without needing Whistler's confirmation chirp, that this was a broodmother. She moved differently than the drone, slower, more deliberate, each of her 4 arms articulating with an eerie fluid grace, like watching a dancer who had never once made an unintentional motion in her life. Her chitin caught the weak light of Threshold's distant sun, and threw it back in shifting bands of violet and black. Priya went rigid beside me. "Eyes down," she whispered. "Eyes down, Dane. Eyes down." I dropped my gaze to my boots, so fast I nearly gave myself whiplash. My heart was doing something complicated and unpleasant in my chest. I could hear the drones clicking intensify, a rising chatter that Whistler's translation array struggled to parse into anything coherent. Fragments only, new, different. Watching the broodmother stopped less than 4 meters from me. I could see her lower legs in my peripheral vision, jointed and glossy, planted in the black glass sand. I could hear her breathing, if that was the word for it, a slow, bellows-like rhythm that stirred the dust at her feet. "Do not move," Priya breathed. "Do not look up. Whatever happens, do not." Something touched my chin. It was so gentle I almost didn't register it as a threat. One clawed finger, impossibly careful, tilted my face upward. I could have resisted. I could have wrenched away. Every instinct screamed at me to do exactly that. But there was something in the touch, a kind of patient certainty, like a hand guiding a nervous animal, that made my body simply complete. Even as my mind shrieked in protest, I looked up, 6 eyes, amber and impossibly deep, fixed on mine. I remember thinking, with a strange, floating calm, "This is where I die." But nothing happened. No pain, no falling, no seizure of the nervous system, no blood in my ears. None of the horror stories Okoi had traded around the mess hall, like ghost stories at a campfire. Just 6 eyes, looking at me with an intensity that felt less like a predator, sizing up prey, and more like, I hesitate to even think the word, but there is no better one. Recognition. The drones went silent. Whistler's vocalizer stuttered out a fragment of translated pheromone static. Mine, found. Mine. The broodmother tilted her head, slow and birdlike, still holding my chin with that one impossibly gentle claw. Then she released me, stepped back, and let out a sound I'd never heard from a Vael before, low and resonant, almost musical, that the drones around her echoed back like a rippling wave. And then she was gone, retreating into the black glass fissures with her escort of drones, leaving me standing there with my heart hammering, and Priya staring at me like I'd just grown a second head. "You're not dead," she said. "No," I agreed. "I don't think I am. They quarantined me for 6 days." Dr. Reyes ran every scan the Outpost medbay possessed, twice over. Neural imaging, blood panels, pheromone residue analysis, even an old-fashioned reflex test with a little rubber hammer, as if 6 days of broodmother-induced brain rot might reveal itself in a slow knee-jerk. Nothing. I was, by every measurable metric, completely unharmed. Commander Voss did not share the medical team's relief. She was a severe woman with silver-threaded hair cropped close to her skull, and she had built her career on the principle that alien contact protocols existed precisely because we didn't understand the aliens, and anomalies were how people die. "You broke a hard rule," she told. "On day 4 of my quarantine, standing on the other side of a transparent containment wall, like I was some kind of exhibit. One that has held for 9 years. One that has cost 5 lives to establish. And nothing happened to you." "I didn't break it on purpose," I said. She touched my chin. "I didn't have a choice. That's what concerns me." Voss's expression didn't change, but something in her voice sharpened. "The others who died, did any of them report being touched first? Physically guided?" I thought about it. The 5 names were part of the mandatory briefing every new arrival received. As far as I remember, all 5 had made contact under different circumstances. Accidental glances during drone negotiations. One man who'd panicked and looked back over his shoulder while fleeing a startled hive guard. None of the reports mentioned a broodmother, deliberately, gently, tilting a chin upward. "No," I said slowly. "I don't think they were." Voss was quiet for a long moment. "Then either you got lucky, in a way 5 other people didn't," she said, "or something about this particular broodmother's interest in you is different from anything we've documented. Neither of those possibilities makes me feel better, Osei." She wasn't wrong, but there was something else nagging at me, too. Something I didn't say aloud in that sterile little quarantine room. The way the broodmother's eyes had looked at me. Not with the cold calculation of a predator. Not with the alien indifference the reports always described the drones as having. There had been something almost tender in that gaze. Something that had settled into my chest like a stone, dropped into still water, spreading ripples I couldn't yet name. I was released from quarantine on day 7. With a clean bill of health and a formal recommendation, buried in Voss's report, that I be reassigned to a different sector of operation, away from any future contact with the nest. It didn't matter. The nest wasn't finished with me. She came to the outpost itself 11 days later. Nobody had ever seen a broodmother leave the nest's territory before. The entire premise of the hive's social structure, as far as our xenobiologists understood it, was that the broodmother remained at the network's center, cognitively, physically, symbolically, while drones extended outward to do her bidding. A broodmother wandering 4 kilometers from her tunnels, alone, without escort, was unprecedented. The perimeter sensors caught her a full 90 seconds before she reached the outer fence, and by the time she arrived, half the outpost security detail was assembled, rifles half raised, nobody quite sure what the correct response was to an alien queen who had simply decided to take a walk. I was in the mess hall when Okoi burst in, face pale. "She's asking for you," he said. Whistler's translating. "She's not moving until she sees you, sees me, or just come on, Osei." I walked out to the perimeter fence with my heart doing that complicated hammering thing again, and there she was, standing in the amber dust just beyond the fence line, 6 eyes glowing steady in the half-light of Threshold's long dusk. She hadn't come with drones this time. She'd come alone. Commander Voss was already there. Arms crossed, jaw set like carved stone. "You are not to make eye contact," she said to me without turning her head. "Whistler will translate. You'll keep your eyes on her chest plates, understood?" I nodded, even though some small, reckless part of me already knew I wasn't going to follow that instruction. Whistler's vocalizer crackled to life, translating the low subsonic hum that rolled off the broodmother like heat off summer asphalt. "You did not run." The translation came through, choppy and mechanical. "You did not flinch. You looked, and you did not break." "I didn't have much choice," I said. You held my chin. A pause. Then, the others who looked, they looked in fear, or by accident, or in defiance. Their minds closed against me like a fist. There was nothing to reach. I gave them a mercy, an ending, quick, before their fear could curdle into something worse. You did not close. You opened. The words landed on me like cold water. A mercy. All this time we'd assumed the deaths were some kind of biological defense mechanism, a parasite, a kill switch. Nobody had considered that the broodmother might have been making a choice each time, and that the choice had been, in her own alien framework, an act of compassion. What does that mean? I opened? It means you saw me. The translation stumbled through the concept. Whistler's array clearly straining against a linguistic architecture that had no human equivalent. Not the shape, not the danger. Me. The eyes are not a weapon, Dane Osei. They are a door. Every drone in my nest lives inside my mind, sees what I see, feels what I feel, through that door. Your kind, when you look through it in fear, cannot bear what is on the other side. The weight of 10,000 minds pressing at once. It breaks you, and so I end it before the breaking becomes agony. But you. She took one step closer to the fence, and I felt Voss's hand close hard around my arm, but I didn't pull my eyes away. You did not break. You held the door open, and something in you reached back. I didn't have an answer for that. I wasn't sure there was one. But standing there, held in the gaze of 6 amber eyes that I now understood to be something closer to a vast and ancient consciousness looking out through a single face, I felt that same strange settling in my chest. Recognition, again, though of what? I still couldn't say. I have watched your outpost for 9 years, she continued. I have watched your kind take such care not to see me, not to be seen. I understood it as wisdom, but it has also been a great loneliness. 10,000 minds, Dane Osei, and not one of yours among them, until now. Voss's grip on my arm tightened to the point of pain. This is exactly the kind of anomaly I don't like, she muttered, low enough that only I could hear. Get inside now. But the broodmother was not finished. And something told me, some instinct I couldn't fully justify to Voss, to the core, to myself, that walking away now would be a mistake far graver than anything the regulations warned against. What do you want from me? I asked her directly, ignoring Voss's hiss of protest beside me. The broodmother's 6 eyes pulsed, very slightly brighter. To be known. The translation came, slower now, almost gentle. Not as a threat to be avoided. Not as a rule on a card by your door. I have a name, Dane Osei, though your kind has never asked for it, and I have carried the whole weight of my nest's memory and consciousness alone for longer than your species has walked between the stars. I am asking only this. Will you look at me again tomorrow? Will you let the door stay open? The outpost erupted into chaos after that. Voss ordered me confined to quarters for my own protection. Protection from what, exactly? Nobody could quite articulate, since I was demonstrably the one human being on threshold who could survive the very thing that was supposed to kill me on contact. Dr. Reyes ran another battery of tests. Xenolinguistics team pored over Whistler's recordings for 6 straight hours, arguing about translation accuracy, about whether door was a metaphor or something closer to a literal neurological mechanism, about whether the broodmother's claim of loneliness was even a concept the Vael Hive mind was capable of experiencing, given that a broodmother was never, by definition, alone. I sat through all of it in a kind of numb suspension, replaying the conversation over and over. Not one of yours among them, until now. 10,000 minds orbiting a single point of consciousness, and somehow, impossibly, mine had slipped through some crack in a barrier. 5 other people had died, trying to cross. Candor Voss came to see me that, alone, without her usual entourage of aides and note-takers. I want to send you home, she said, without preamble, on the next supply run, 3 weeks out. Why? Because I've spent 11 years in this line of work, and I have learned that the universe does not owe us safe anomalies. Whatever is happening between you and that creature, it doesn't fit anything in our protocols, and things that don't fit protocols get people killed. She sat down heavily across from me. I don't think you're in danger from her directly. I think that's obvious by now, but I don't know what she wants beyond what she's told you, and I don't know what happens to the rest of us if you keep answering that door. I understood her fear. It was reasonable, grounded, exactly the kind of caution that had kept the outpost alive for 9 years. And yet she said she's been alone, I said. 10,000 minds, and never once another consciousness that could look back at her without breaking. Commander, we came out here to make contact. Isn't this, whatever this is, exactly what first contact is supposed to look like? Not just catalog, not just trading through drones at arm's length. An actual door, opening, both ways. Voss studied me for a long moment. Something in her rigid posture softened, just slightly. You understand that if you go back out there tomorrow, and something goes wrong, there may be nothing any of us can do to help you. I understand, and you're going anyway. It wasn't really a question. I thought about the 6 amber eyes, about the strange ache of recognition that had settled into my chest, about the word lonely, rendered through a stuttering translation drone from a mind that held 10,000 others inside it, and had still somehow found room to feel alone. "Yes," I said, "I'm going anyway." I went back to the fence line at dawn. She was already waiting, standing perfectly still in the pale early light, 6 eyes glowing like embers against the gray of Threshold's low dawn sky. No drones this time either, just her and me, and the thin metal fence between us that suddenly felt less like a boundary and more like a formality neither of us much believed in. "You came back," Whistler translated, and I thought I heard something almost like surprise in the cadence, though I couldn't be certain how much of that was real and how much was my own hope bleeding into the interpretation. "I said I would. Your kind does not always keep such promises to mine. I'm not everyone." Her head tilted, that same bird-like, considering motion. "No," she said, "you are not. We talked for hours that morning, if you could call it talking. This halting exchange mediated by a translation drone, straining at the very edges of its programming to render concepts that human language had never needed words for. I learned that her name, in the closest approximation Whistler could manage, was something like Ashkaravet, though she made clear that names meant something different to a being who existed simultaneously as one and as 10,000. I learned that the hive had been on Threshold for longer than human civilization had existed, that broodmothers were neither immortal nor infinite, that each one carried the accumulated memory of every broodmother before her, stretching back in an unbroken chain into a past so deep it made our species' entire recorded history look like a single breath. I learned that the deaths, the 5 names on our briefing cards, had haunted her in whatever way a being like her could be haunted. Not guilt not as we understood it, but something adjacent to grief, the weight of having to end a connection before it could truly begin, over and over, because the human mind simply wasn't built to hold what she carried. "Why me?" I asked her, finally, the question that had been sitting under my ribs since that first afternoon in the Black Glass Valley. "Out of everyone who's come through this outpost in 9 years, why did it work with me?" She was quiet for a long moment, 6 eyes fixed steadily on mine, and when the translation came through, it was slower than before, more careful, like she was reaching for a truth even she didn't fully have words for. "I do not know that there is a reason your kind would accept as sufficient," she said. "I only know that when the door opened between us I did not find fear on the other side. I found curiosity, wonder, a mind reaching toward mine instead of recoiling from it. Perhaps it is simply that, Dane Osei. Perhaps it is only that you were willing to see me, not the danger, not the rule on the card, before you knew whether it would kill you." I thought about that for a long time, about all the ways fear shapes a species' first instincts, the caution bred into us by 5 deaths, by 9 years of careful distance, by a laminated card bolted next to every airlock. I thought about how easy it would have been for me to flinch, to look away, to let the fear close that door before it ever had the chance to open. I hadn't, and here we were. It took the better part of 2 months for the Outpost's official policy to catch up with what had already happened between us. Commander Voss, to her credit, did not simply dismiss the situation as an anomaly to be quarantined and studied from a safe remove. She brought in specialists from 3 different research vessels, convened round-the-clock sessions with the xenolinguistics team, and slowly, carefully, began to rebuild the entire framework of human Vael contact around a discovery that changed everything we thought we understood about the hive. The eyes weren't a weapon. They were, exactly as Ashkaravet had said, a door. A neural interface evolved over uncounted generations to let a broodmother extend her consciousness outward into her nest, and, it turned out, potentially outward into any mind willing to meet her without the reflexive terror that had doomed 5 explorers before me. It wasn't luck that had spared me. It wasn't random biological chance. It was, as strange as it still felt to say it, a kind of mutual recognition. 2 very different kinds of mind, finding, against every expectation embedded in the mission briefing, that they could hold the door open together without either one breaking. We built a new protocol. Not never look, but look together. Supervised, careful, incremental sessions between Ashkaravet and volunteer specialists, always monitored, always with an exit plan if the connection began to strain in ways it hadn't with me. Some volunteers managed brief exchanges. None managed what had happened between us in that first accidental meeting in the Black Glass Valley. Ashkaravet never explained why, exactly, beyond that same quiet answer. Some doors opened differently for different hands. As for me, I stayed on Threshold long past my original rotation. Voss, against every instinct her career had trained into her, signed the extension herself, muttering something about not being willing to break the first genuinely stable bridge Our species had built to an alien mind in over 100 years of contact. I visited the fence line every morning. Sometimes Ashkaraveth met me there alone. Sometimes drones came with her, clicking and swaying in pattern that Whistler's translation array was slowly learning to read as something like contentment. We talked about her nest's ancient memory, about the deep tunnels beneath Threshold's black glass valleys that stretched back farther than we'd yet dared to map. I told her about Earth, about oceans and forests and cities full of minds that had never once had to worry about a gaze that could kill. She listened to all of it with the same steady, six-eyed attention she'd given me that very first day, the attention of something ancient and vast, finally finding one mind out of billion, willing to hold the door open and stay. I still have the laminated card Okoi pressed into my hand on my first day at Kestrel 9. Do not make eye contact with a Vael broodmother. I keep it pinned above my bunk now. Not as a warning anymore, but as a reminder of how close I came to never looking up at all, of how easily fear could have kept that door shut forever. They still teach the old rule to new arrival, because caution still has its place, and not every mind that meets a broodmother's gaze will find what I found. But there's a new line on the card now, added after months of debate among the Corps' ethics board, in smaller print beneath the warning. Some doors, once opened, are worth everything it costs to walk through. Ashkaraveth told me once that a broodmother's memory stretches back through an unbroken chain of predecessors, each one carrying forward everything the ones before her had seen and felt and known. I think about that sometimes, about what it will mean, centuries from now, for whatever comes after her to remember this, to remember that once a human stood at a fence line at dawn and looked up instead of away, and found not an ending, but a beginning neither of us could have predicted. They said, never look her in the eyes. I'm glad, every single day, that I did.